يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Saturday edition of Let's Talk with me, Julie Ali. There's a strong focus on the show this morning around environmental issues. We're going to be looking at our river systems, how to keep them clean, and we're also going to be looking at a new way and a new biodegradable plastics and packaging. But right now we're going to talk children, those important people, little people in our lives, and the rights of children. What do we as Muslim parents need to know about the rights of our children? How vested are we in our children and their rights? Let's unpack all of that, very especially in the South African context. And in studio to talk about children and their rights is Attorney Farhana Ismail. And we kick off right away by talking about the Children's Act 38 of 2005 and issues around children. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Alaikum salam, jazakallah for having me.
Important discussion because we're talking about those very important little people in our lives. As Muslims, I'm kind of wondering, I referred to the Children's Act 38 of 2005, but as Muslims, should we even be talking about this? I mean, according to Sharia, we know what the rights of children and women are and how we need to protect them and how we need to support them and respect them. But I guess from a South African perspective or a global perspective, it is a conversation one needs to have.
Most definitely. I think that the starting point in this would be that obviously in Islam, women and children have gotten rights from the time of our Prophet ﷺ and even before that. But there is a misconception in South Africa currently that Muslim women and Muslim children are not afforded any protection. Now, what we must bear in mind is that because we live in South Africa and we are subject to the laws of the Republic of South Africa and its Constitution and Bill of Rights, Sharia laws cannot be implemented insofar as women and children are concerned in our legal system. However, the Children's Act 38 of 2005 refers to all children and affords all children protection irrespective of race, color, creed, or religion. So that's our starting point, insofar as clearing up the misconception that Muslim children are not afforded any legal protection. The second point of misconception is that Muslim fathers are not afforded rights insofar as children are concerned in South African law. And that is a huge misunderstanding because they are afforded rights.
Are we talking in terms of separations, a couple separating or a couple that is divorced? So are we talking about rights and are we talking about contact rights as far as those children are concerned? And in the same token, I think what also pops up is the issue around maintenance. So would I be on the right track when I say that we're talking about children's right in that context?
Not only in that context. So in the Children's Act, Chapter 3 of the Children's Act deals with parental responsibilities and rights. So from the time that a child is born and the mom identifies a particular individual as the father of that child, it is deemed that both mom and dad by default automatically are co-holders of parental responsibilities and rights in terms of the Children's Act, meaning that neither parent has more rights over the child than the other parent. That is the automatic position.
Even if one partner is in a stronger financial position and is able to support that child fully, or and not rely on the other partner at all for that child support, whether they're married or divorced.
Irrespective. The fact that a partner cannot afford to maintain a minor child does not strip him of his parental responsibilities and rights.
Now, we know that in days gone by or years gone by, I've heard of a lot of cases. I have no doubt, as a lawyer yourself, an attorney, practicing from Fordsburg, Johannesburg, your speciality being family and divorce law.
Yes.
So we are talking about something pretty close to your heart.
Yes.
But in days gone by, there was this perception that if a father does not pay maintenance, the mother will deny him contact with the child. Does that still stand? Or can the father go to the courts and request regular contact with his child, whether he is able to afford to maintain the child or not?
That was never the case. That if a dad was unable to support a child, that he was not allowed to have access to the child. Our law has always provided him with that protection. So definitely, and I wouldn't only say moms, because in the reverse, it's also been where dads had children and were supporting the children, and the moms, were denied access. That was never the case. In fact, maintenance and access rights to children are totally separate issues. So the court will never condone the fact that if a parent is unable to support a child, that the parent be denied access. So there is one of the biggest misconceptions over the years that we need to clear up within the community. So just going back to, I mentioned parental responsibilities and rights. Parental responsibilities and rights includes various elements within the Children's Act. So I want to go through some of those elements, and you can then stop me along the way, if you've got questions in between. But the first element of parental responsibilities and rights, bearing in mind that I've already said to you that both parents at the birth of the child are co-holders of these responsibilities and rights. Your first element of that responsibility and right is guardianship. So both parents are considered co-guardians of this child, whether they are married or they are not married, whether they are jointly maintaining the child or they're not jointly maintaining the child. They are co-guardians of this
What
child.
falls under the ambit of guardianship? I'm thinking roles and responsibilities, because it's a very, it's kind of a very big word with far-reaching consequences, I should imagine.
Yes. So in South African law, the High Court is the upper guardian of all minor children, meaning that when parents as guardians have issues relating to aspects of guardianship, which I will come to now, the High Court is the only court as the upper guardian of all minor children to deal with those issues. What does guardianship entail? Guardianship entails certain aspects such as the adoption of the minor child. If the child is to be adopted, the child cannot be adopted without the consent of both the biological parents. If either of the parent wants to travel with the minor child, they cannot travel without the consent of the other guardian. If either of the parent wants to apply for a passport for the child, they cannot obtain that passport without the consent of the other guardian. If the child is under the age of 18 and wants to enter into a marriage or a contract, the child cannot do so without the consent of the other guardian, because they are co-guardians. So they cannot act unilaterally without the consent of each other.
Guardianship automatically falls away if one of the parents passes away, then only
Yes.
the one parent is the total guardian of that child. I'm thinking grandparents, uncles, aunts do not have a responsibility or a role to play here.
As guardians, no. Unless they apply to the High Court to obtain guardianship. And they need to motivate why they would be suitable guardians, but they are not guardians automatically. And on the reverse side of that coin, if any parent fails in their duty as a guardian, one can apply to the High Court for the suspension or termination of that guardianship.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. When we come back, let's talk about what failure looks like and what the conditions would be for one parent to lose guardianship of their child or children. Attorney Farhana Ismail is my guest. We're talking about children's rights right here in South Africa, and we are referring to the Children's Act 38 of 2005. And of course, we're going to be unpacking lots more after the ad break. Welcome back. Farhana Ismail is an attorney. She practices in Fordsburg, Johannesburg. Her speciality is family and divorce law. And we're talking about children's rights right here in South Africa. Farhana, back to you. And just before the ad break, we were talking guardianship. We also spoke about if one of the spouses die and relatives and grandparents not having a right to apply for guardianship. Of course, they could if it's under very extreme circumstances. What would they be?
If both parents are not alive or, pass away simultaneously, or if, a child is being abused to such an extent that we apply for the suspension and termination of that child's, of that parent's guardianship, then any interested party can apply to court for the child to be a guardian. For that person to be a guardian to the child in order to regulate what, the elements that we spoke of earlier.
What would the difference be between guardianship and the care of the child?
Okay. So as I said, the guardianship aspect is dealt with by the High Court. Now, government has formalized and put into place the Children's Court that are present at various courts throughout the country. The Children's Court is empowered to deal with all other aspects in respect of parental responsibilities and rights apart from guardianship. Now, one of the aspects that the Children's Court will look at is the care of the child.
Day-to-day care.
The day-to-day care of the child, if the child is being well looked after. And in the event of parties separating or parties being divorced or, one party denying access to the contact to the other party to see the child, the Children's Court will regulate and make orders to the effect to provide the following relief in respect of the party that's applying. Now, insofar as the care of the child is concerned, the care of the child deals with the upbringing of the child, the moral fiber of the child, medical decisions, dental decisions, religion, and education of the child. Those are just some of the examples insofar as the care of the child is concerned. Currently, by virtue of the of both parents identifying each other as parents, they are both co-holders of those rights. So they need to make joint decisions relating to the education, religion, and all the other factors that I mentioned.
What happens if a couple have married across the religious line? They both belong to different religions. And, before the child comes into the picture, there's this great big love affair going on. But once reality sets in, all the demons start presenting themselves. Yes. And then there's this tug of war between, I want the child to follow my religion, or I want the child to follow our customs and traditions. How does that dispute get resolved? Because obviously if you're talking a minor child, you can't expect that child to make a decision as to which religion to follow. A lot of couples are also suggesting, which I think is so unfair to the child, is that when he or she reaches the age of maturity, they can make the decision which religion they want to follow. What's your take on that?
So the approach that the courts are adopting, and we are bound by the law now.
Of course.
Irrespective of what our religious beliefs are. And that is why in the Muslim community, we prefer mediation and arbitration on these matters. But going back to how the South African court would view the difference of religion is when the child is with the mum will expose the child to her religion and her beliefs. When he's with the dad, child will be exposed to dad's religion and dad's beliefs, practices, cultural practices, etc. And as you said, and then when the child reaches a certain age, 16 or 18, the child will then be in a position to freely choose. So that is the position that the courts adopt. The courts will never make an order that the child has to follow a certain religion.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's why these type of issues need to be penned down. At the time when you're thinking of entering into a relationship with different religions,
Yes.
etc. Because
Yes.
it's so important. Because at the end of it all, the child ends up being this football being kicked about from one parent to the other.
Yes.
Let's look at the child who, let's assume it's a separation, and the child prefers to live with the father rather than with the mother. Whether he's been bribed into going to live with the father or not, but he chooses that. What's the court's position on that situation?
So let's look at the following scenario. Mom and dad approach court and both are fighting for the primary residence of the child. So in terms of the Children's Act, the terminology has changed. Many people refer to the term custody.
Yes.
There's no longer the custody in our law. It's now called care and it's now called primary residence, who the child will be primarily resident with, who the child lives with. Okay, and then the other parent, then the non-resident parent, will have rights of contact to their child. Now, whether it's supervised or unsupervised, we'll discuss that a bit later, but that's the terminology that the Children's Act now uses. So in a situation where the couple have divorced and they are both fighting for primary residence of this child, and they cannot seem to reach an agreement, normally what happens is the matter is referred to the Office of the Family Advocate, which is created, is a creature of statute, created to deal with these issues. The family advocate will then commence with a mediation between the couple, and if they then agree, they will then conclude a parenting plan which is made in order of court. If they don't agree, the family advocate then carries out an investigation. So they will interview the mom, interview the dad. If necessary, a social worker will carry out a home circumstances investigation and provide the court with a report as to what are the living circumstances of both parties. And importantly, they will look at the views of the minor child or children. So Section 10 of the Children's Act provides that consideration must be given to the views of the minor child, taking into consideration their age, and level of maturity. So they will then look at what the child has to say, and family advocate will then give a recommendation to the court, and then the court will look at the recommendation and decide, finally, looking at all the facts presented before them, what will be in the best interest of the child and where the child will ultimately reside.
We talk about maintenance, and we know at age 18, is it at age 18 or till the child stops studying, that the father or whichever parent is in the best financial situation to maintain the child. When does maintenance stop? Would it be till he or she stops studying, or age 18?
So the view is that maintenance would cease until the child becomes self-supporting. So even after the age of 18, if dad has been paying for studies, then the child is, which is mostly the case, the child is continuing to study. He or she is not in a position to support themselves, and parents are then liable to maintain them if they have not been. And if they cease to maintain them, a child can then take the parents to maintenance court and apply for maintenance for the parents to continue supporting the child.
When was this law passed? I'm thinking about, what about 20 or 30 years ago, perhaps, if one of the parents refused to maintain that child fully, made ad hoc payments from time to time for those children, but didn't fully take responsibility of the maintenance of those children, can the child at this point in their lives sue the father for not having maintained them over those past years?
For arrear maintenance?
Yes.
No. So unless there was a court order in place, there was a court order in place, and the child can prove, what payments were made, and the father breached that court order, or the mom breached that court order, then only you can sue for arrear maintenance. But, there's also the issue of prescription.
Which is
that after a certain time,
3 years, I think it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure insofar as maintenance proceedings are concerned, and what's the attitude of the courts in respect of prescription.
But it has to be in writing.
I would think that if there's a court order, it doesn't prescribe. If an application was made, but it's a bit of a grey area for me.
All right, Farhana, we've got 2 minutes to wrap up time, believe it or not. The important message we want to leave our viewers with today, as far as the Children's Act is concerned, maintenance, contact and residence, very quickly.
So I think the important thing that we need to clear up today, and the message that today's show needs to leave the viewers with, is that both parents are equal holders of parental responsibilities and rights. Neither parent has a better right than the other parent. The only difference between the two parents is who the child will be primarily resident with. So if the child is primarily resident with the father, and the mom has got rights of contact, doesn't mean that they have got the dad has got more rights over the mom, and vice versa.
And the one very important message we do want to leave our viewers with this morning is that even if the father doesn't maintain the child regularly, doesn't mean that the mother can deny him access or contact with the child.
Absolutely. Those are two different topics. There are two different aspects of law. And if the dad is not paying maintenance, or the mom's not paying, mom has a right to approach the maintenance court, but cannot enforce payment of maintenance through denying access. She'll actually shoot herself in the foot, and vice versa if the dad is doing so.
Thank you indeed. That's where we have to leave it. No doubt we'll get together again sometime soon to talk some more. That was Attorney Farhana Ismail talking to us about the Children's Act 38 of 2005, talking about children's rights. I do hope that's given you an idea or an overview of issues around maintenance and access or contact to children, very especially in a situation of divorce or separation. Still to come, we're going to talk environmental issues, how to keep our rivers clean, and the new type of biodegradable packaging. So don't go away. And welcome back. Our next guest is Willem Snyman. He's with an organization called Fresh, and it's all about cleaning up the river systems right here in Gauteng. But I think you and I both are aware of the fact that this is a huge problem countrywide, and thank goodness for people like Willem Snyman and Fresh. They started this initiative about 3 years ago. Let's hear where they're at now, and are other people replicating their recipe for the cleanup of rivers and dams. Willem, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Julie. Thank you very much.
Worrying situation, isn't it? the pollution we're seeing around us, because it's not only about pollution, it's about our health being impacted. It's about all of the diseases which we've never heard about in the past, which is obviously impacting on all of us. So where and how did the interest start for you and the organization called FRESH?
Yes, FRESH stands for Fountains and Rivers Environmental Sanctuary, Hennops. So we're working basically from the Hennops River Valley. It's quite at the end of the Hennops River, and it's still quite a natural area of the confluence of the Hennops, Yukska and Crocodile River. So we were seeing a lot of pollution coming down. It's been going on for a decade now, but perhaps in the last 5 years it really escalated to huge volumes with thick black foam coming down. The fish were gasping for air, and there was a white foam as well. It often comes down, so the whole river is covered with a thick layer, about a meter thick, stretching all the way up to its origin. It's about 100 kilometers long. So I think those things are impacting the whole freshwater system. I mean, as you know, most diseases are waterborne. So the thing is that untreated sewage contains so many diseases. As you said, we don't even know what they are. And it poses as a big risk to a lot of people. A lot of people still use the river for religious ceremonies, for even in our area. I'm not sure if it's still, but a lot of people use it.
And recreation.
Recreation, of course.
If you're still able to do that.
If you're still able, yeah. A lot of people even use it for drinking water, purifying it, for bathing in. So, I don't know, we've been seeing a lot of illnesses and death in our area, which are difficult to explain, people getting cancer. So I think a lot of it is interlinked with the state of our freshwater system. Another troubling issue for me is the Rietvlei Dam up in, it's one of the sources of the Hennops in above Centurion. And there have been a few studies done there that look at the amount of, they call them endocrine disruptive compounds. So these things are like heavy metals and other kind of chemicals that actually disturb the functioning of our metabolism. So they actually go in on a cellular level, and I think those things are quite a big cause of cancer. So,
would this impact be felt if you drinking the water directly from the river, whether you boil it or whatever it is that you do to purify it and have the water? Is that when the impact is being felt, or is it the water then which is being tapped to us, to our homes, that there is still perhaps a risk involved?
I think it's both of those, yes, because there are a lot of people who use the river directly for, as you say, recreational purposes. I mean, people used to swim in the river. And the problem with the Rietvlei, it's a source of drinking water for the whole of Tshwane, so they mix it, I think, 30 to 70% with rainwater. But those things, I mean, some of them are called also persistent organic pollutants, so they're very difficult to remove. The water is treated, so I think it's fairly safe, but it's not ideal. I mean, those compounds, they say if it goes through a treatment works, you're lucky if you get maybe 80% of those things out. And I think similar to treatment works, the other problem is then that water is so highly chlorinated to try and kill all of those pathogens that it's also, again, posing a health risk.
Absolutely.
And even when it is released into the environment, the chlorine can change into a carcinogenic chloro something compound. So I think it's impacting our whole freshwater system and our drinking water. And as you know, our bodies are 90% water. So I think we're part of this whole system. And I think the high incidence of cancer and all of these degenerative diseases that were virtually unknown a generation ago are, I would say, very much linked to that.
And we wonder where it's coming from.
Exactly.
And we are directly responsible, of course. We can't.
Absolutely, yeah.
We can't apportion the blame to other sources. We, as South African citizens, are to be blamed for it. You then decided you wanted to be active. You wanted to do something. You're taking the responsibility to try and clean up our river systems. You started the organization Fresh, it's an NPO. How many other people on board with you? And I understand that you have two major mandates. So let's talk about startup, people involved, and your mandates.
Okay. We've got 3 directors, but we link to a whole sort of network of other people that are involved, and we also link to other organizations. I'm also part of another organization, a river organization called ARMA. They're also looking at all the rivers of Gauteng. We link to another organization called Hennops Blue that's in the top of Hennops River. So we've got social networks, we're engaging with government, with municipalities, and trying to find solutions, So we also go and investigate problems at sewage farms, and then engage with government to try and see how those things can be solved. Try and get water testing done. We're working with Wits University. It's a big project. We're starting a whole project now to try and clean up the sources of these rivers, because they start, a lot of them, the Hennops has got 2 sources. On the one side it starts in Tembisa. It's all big fountains that originate there. So we'd like to...
Isn't there dynamite or some sort of factory or factories out in that area, and isn't that perhaps part of the problem?
I think that's more on the Yukske. There's that Modderfontein works.
Modderfontein, yes.
That's connected. It's very close actually to the Hennops sources. It's almost like they're all running off this Witwatersrand area. So even on the one side you find the Hennops sources, and on the other side of the watershed the Yukske sources. So it's in a way a linked problem. So what we'd like to do is go up to these sources. We're working with the Department of Environmental Affairs as well, and they're going to do a cleanup of the solid waste, and then we'd like to go in with microorganisms and try to restore these wetlands to life, to bring back on a very basic level, the living organisms in those wetlands, and then try and build it further up, bring back the frogs, the crabs, and that whole system. The nice thing about these wetlands, the one we're going to work on, it's called the Kolfontein wetland. So it's almost like above the sewage line, so we can restore life back into a corner, and then hopefully let that life seed back eventually once we get the river clean.
Sounds like you have your work cut out for you.
We do.
I'm also wondering about rapid urbanization. That too is part of the problem, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean
because that's taking away the wetlands, and it's sorely needed in preserving the quality of our water.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the problem is that these wetlands are mostly dead from pollution. The whole river is becoming dead from pollution. So it's really, the problem is with these. I mean, the whole riverbank and the grassland used to hold the river, hold the rainwater, and then slowly release it. But now it's rapidly flowing into the river off the concrete. So it's becoming huge floods, and the riverbanks aren't really equipped for that. And the riverbanks are in themselves severely impacted because of the loss of life. The trees are dying. The huge amounts of aliens along the rivers. So the aliens get ripped out, and they break off pieces of the riverbank. So it's not looking very well.
It sounds like a doom and gloom story to me, but let's unpack more a little later on in the show. We need to take an ad break. Willem Snyman is in studio talking about, gosh, it sounds really bad. I'm sitting here and cringing as he speaks about the state of rivers in Gauteng, but of course that is a microcosm playing out and is indicating to us what's happening in the rest of the country. Lots more coming up after the ad break. We continue our talk with Willem Snyman. We're talking about cleaning up our river and water systems in Gauteng, and he's with an organization called Fresh. You've talked about your two mandates, reviving wetlands. I threw in the issue around rapid urbanization being another problem. Mm-hmm. What else do you need to do to perhaps see some light at the end of the tunnel?
The thing is, it's mostly a sewage-related problem. I mean, I think all of our rivers are really impacted by sewage. And,
Why? I was not aware that sewage is flowing directly into our river systems. Is there no other way that the sanitation department can get rid of the sewage? I mean, what are countries around the world doing?
Yeah, well, what we'd like to introduce is it's called effective microorganisms, and working with a lot. The sewage farms have got a very limited range of microorganisms that they're using to treat these things. So even if that plant is working very well, then a lot of these things are still not taken out, you know, like hormones, like those endocrine disruptors I was talking about, the heavy metals. So what we'd like to do is to introduce all of those organisms so they colonize the whole system, and then they break down the complicated molecules. The toxins are very complex molecules, so they get split by these microorganisms into harmless substances. So that's really the only way to, because the problem with the normal, they call it activated sludge treatment, is that those things aren't really broken down. They become, in a way, concentrated in that black sludge, which is then, it used to be dumped on huge sludge dumps. Now it's, they are using biodigesters to break it down, and then it does sort of get better. They use it as a fertilizer, which is, I think, often also a problem because it's not properly broken down. So
and we're ingesting all of that stuff, are we not?
Exactly, yeah. It becomes on the, it gets thrown on the fields. I mean, we're literally ingesting all of it because the Hartbeespoort Dam is one of our major irrigation dams. So, I mean, all of the sludge from the XK, Hennops and Crocodile, and even Magalies River, they all end up in the Hartbeespoort Dam, which is becoming quite a dangerous thing. You know, even the study I read on the Rietvlei Dam, that's almost in 2007, they were saying they've got 100,000 times chances of getting cancer if you use this water on your vegetables. You know, so it's actually very dangerous, and I think it's a bit irresponsible of the government to expose the people to these risks, you know.
Well, I'm just wondering if Fresh hadn't intervened 3 years ago and all of the other organizations that you've been talking about, where would we be now? It's because of you guys making a noise that we're seeing some action from government, and perhaps the human rights organization needs to become involved like they have become involved with the Vaal Dam and the Vaal River activists, because it seems otherwise we're just not being taken seriously. However, have you seen any progress or improvement since you started up Fresh?
Yes, I think so. I mean, recently the foam seems to become much better. We used to have, the river used to be always foaming, and I see that has kind of changed now. So
what is that telling you?
I think the treatment process has been upgraded in a lot of we've got 3 plants, 3 wastewater treatment works on the Hennops, and some of them were, it seems to be it's almost like a bacteria that's living in the wastewater treatment work that's causing the foam, although there are other causes, I think, of just grey water and phosphates in the water. But that does seem to have improved. We've now had, on the other hand, we've had, the river has just turned black now for 3 days. So I think there's a lot of sludge that's lying on the bottom of the river that's now, with the first rains, it gets washed down. So we got a bit frightened again. We thought it was looking better, and now it's actually looking much worse. But we hopefully, I think we've turned a corner, and that hopefully the next season it will be getting better if we start work up on the sources and try and start bringing those things to life. Then I think it will immediately help the river. The problem with the river, it's got no more life in it, you know. So a river has got a lot of self-cleaning organisms that keeps it clean, and at the moment there's nothing, so it's just running straight through. It's not really getting improved, the quality, so it's just ending up in the dam and downriver.
What still needs to be done for Fresh to see some form of improvement or further improvements?
Yeah, well, a lot of things. I think, as I said, we're going to start with these microorganisms. We want to start with restoring those wetlands to life. We'd like to start with artificial wetlands outside of these sewage farms, in a way to filter that wastewater, the effluent, to a much greater extent. And we'd also like to get those organisms into the treatment works to get it much more properly treated. We'd like to get these sewage pipes. That's another problem, that they keep on blocking and overflowing. So
why is that happening?
It's a few reasons. A lot of it's caused by older maintenance, not properly maintained pipes. People are also mining these pipes, so they literally go and block these things, and then apparently they get rings and things out of it. And it's also, in a sense, the community aren't really aware of it. So you get a blocked pipe that might be overflowing. We went to one in Ivory Park recently, and the guy says it's been like this for 10 years. You know, they can't eat. And those things, you know, if you report them, then the council actually they fix them up very quickly. So it's we'd like to involve we're going to work now with the wetlands in Tembisa to involve the community and involve them in these wetlands and try and uplift the whole area. And I think in that sense there will become a greater respect for these wetlands and for the water sources that are feeding these rivers, you know.
And it's in all of our interests to become involved. I can't sit here thinking, oh well, Willem and Fresh are doing something about it. They're very active in that area. They have an MPO, so they need to get on with the job. It's in all of our interests that we as community members become involved as volunteers. What sort of voluntary work would you expect from people like myself?
Well, I think that this new project, as I say, that we're going to try up in Tembisa, that could be it could involve, we just want to clean it up a little bit first with the microorganisms. I think there is a bit of a danger for exposure. Yeah. Recently I was up at another cleaning event and I got sick immediately. So I think those things are quite toxic. So it's difficult to bring the public in on cleaning up days. But I think generally, I think if people just realize this connection that they have, I mean, almost their bathroom and the river is directly connected, you know. So, I mean, I think one must be careful.
We don't think of it in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. You expect it's all getting cleaned out somewhere, but it's not really, it never really leaves that system, you know. So if you throwing chemicals into your drain and toilet and everything, it's kind of, it really just ends up in the sea eventually, you know. And I mean, a lot of it gets broken down by
natural processes.
Natural process, yeah.
All right, Willem. Now, obviously, when you expect the community to become involved, you hopefully will have a very big turnout. But what about people sitting at home who are not going to become involved? What is it that they can do to play a meaningful part in cutting down the problem that you're sitting with? You express the issue around chemicals being thrown down the toilet drain, etc. What sort of chemicals are you referring to? How do we know what we're doing, how we're cleaning our bathrooms, toilets and drains is being done responsibly? Do you kind of have do's and don'ts that you'd like to share with our viewers this morning?
Well, I think, I mean, things like washing powders, if you can look for things that are phosphate-free, I know it's difficult to find, but those phosphates are definitely causing problems downstream. I think that's a big cause of the foaming. I think if you can look at using biodegradable products in your bathroom, in your home, that will help a lot, you know, because a lot of these chemicals are very difficult to break down. They call them persistent organic pollutants. So they literally don't break down. It's like the old DDT and those things. They keep on being recycled in the system. Animals take them up, and then larger animals eat them, and they become sort of deposited in the fatty tissue. So it's important to try and use or to try and keep that freshwater system chemical free.
I think your next, obviously, organizations like Fresh and other such organizations need to start targeting the big corporates, the guys that are selling the stuff, the washing powders, the soaps, the detergents, and everything else. Because if they don't contain the right ingredients or chemicals or compounds, we're going to be sitting with this, we're never going to get around this problem.
Absolutely.
And we also know that the phosphate-free products come at a price they're much more expensive. And to change consumer behavior is going to be a problem as well, because it's going to hit the man in the pocket. So are you guys going to be targeting big businesses to start introducing user-friendly or friendlier ingredients, components, etc., to the environment.
Yes, absolutely. We've been looking at the plastic problem and speaking to different corporations about that, even plastic straws and all that kind of stuff, which are really useless objects that kind of just get into our environment. So I think, ideally we've been looking at targeting government, speaking to them about putting a complete ban on these products, because it's really such a waste putting it into your washing machine or toilet, and then a few kilometers downstream they have to take it out again at the wastewater treatment processes. So these processes are very expensive really to clean the water. So I think it's in a sense that's where it's hitting the public mostly, is in a sense taxes and municipalities. Some a smallish wastewater treatment plant can run at 10 million rand a month, so it's a huge amount, and I think once those things aren't really in that system, you can clean that water much more easily,
Well, hopefully we can get there. Let's go for another short break. When we get back, we'll be wrapping up on Fresh and the amazing work you're doing. Don't go away. We're still going to talk further on the issue of environment, and very especially the Hennops River system with Willem Snyman. Welcome back. Willem Snyman's going to be with us for a further 5 minutes, and we're now going to focus on animal life and the impact to the environment and to us as human beings. How big is that a problem as far as everything we've discussed this morning about the river systems?
I think it's a very big problem, because our freshwater life is very precious around here, and it's very endangered, So I think what we've seen in most of the rivers of Gauteng is that they're pretty much lifeless. All of the fish and the crabs and those things are gone. In our area, as I said, we're in a big nature area, so we still have some otters there. They're called the spot-necked otters, so they're quite rare, and they're still somehow surviving there. So we'd like to start a kind of a program to keep them alive until we can get the river a bit cleaned up. So,
and I guess each and every little ho-ho, insect, creepy, crawly, bird, fish, etc., each one of those insects, reptiles and animals have a huge role to play in the functioning of the ecosystem. And if any one of them are taken out of the equation, you're going to have a gradual breakdown.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, as I say, it's a big ecological web, so everything is interdependent on the other things. So I think what has happened now is that the bottom layer of creatures have disappeared from the microorganisms, the insects and that kind of thing. So we're seeing almost like what they're saying, there's this sixth great extinction, and I think it's on us. And so I think the problem with the fresh water is that it's a breeding area for a lot of animals, like a lot of insects. Their life cycle goes through the fresh water. So as soon as you remove that fresh water, then it's almost like you see the whole system starting to collapse. The animals, what we're already seeing, there aren't any more frogs left, and the snakes are gone. And that's now in a nature reserve, which hasn't really been altered in any other way except pollution. So for me, it's very worrying. I mean, I don't see if things are happening on this scale, what it will be like in another 10 years, if we will have any life left, and how to rehabilitate that thing is for me the major issue, So as I said, we want to start with the microorganisms and try and restore the Hennops River, because, I mean, as bad as the Hennops is, the rest of the rivers are worse. And the Hennops is the only one that still has a chance of sustaining that life. We've got 3 declared nature reserves along the Hennops, along the sources and the middle, and our large area at the bottom. So we'd like to use the Hennops as almost like an arc of life, so one can rehabilitate the life there and let them expand and breed, and then slowly expand it to the other rivers of Gauteng to reseed the life from their sources and try and bring all the others back to life. So we're looking at trying to get the whole river declared as a protected environment. At the moment, our area is becoming a declared nature reserve, so actual sections of the river are becoming a declared nature reserve. So we'd like to extend that protection all the way up to the whole river, and then try and keep it as a pristine environment, you know. Our area...
Willem, this sounds like a lifelong journey that you're on. That would indicate to me that life as you knew it 3 years ago has kind of changed for you dramatically.
Slightly, yeah.
And this is your lifelong work.
It's kind of taken over my life, yeah. Luckily I'm an artist, so I can kind of justify it as an artistic project, but it's difficult to focus on anything else than the river. Although I don't mind, I mean, I'm anyway painting the river and that kind of thing, so it's not a problem. And for me, I mean, seeing those animals back would be enough reward, you know.
Absolutely.
So our area is, I think it's very important because we're right next to the cradle of humankind.
Right.
So this area where these rivers have made this confluence is actually, for me, what we've been trying to promote is the birthplace of humankind in this area. So on the Hennops you find a lot of riverside caves and places where the early hominids would have lived. There's a huge array of stone tools there dating back.
And an amazing tourist attraction.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've done lots of research in trying to rehabilitate the river, the Hennops River. What has your research indicated to you as far as similar problems in other parts of the world, and how have they won the war in regaining their rivers and their waterways?
Yeah, it's a worldwide problem. I think
Is it?
Our freshwater system globally.
So not unique to us in South Africa.
Completely. No, I think a lot of the rivers have actually won the war. You know, like the Rhine has come back, the Thames has come back. So I think those things have kind of taken a. I mean, these are obviously first world countries with, I think, much less problems than we have, and I think a lot more funds to clean up these things. But it is possible, and I think these rivers can be brought back. You know, there is a cut-off point somewhere where I think these rivers become black rivers or something that they say they can't really be rehabilitated. But I think we haven't really reached that point yet. You know, and I think we must turn the tide before it gets to that point.
And it sounds like you're working very, very hard in trying to turn the tide, and unfortunately that's all we have time for. Thank you indeed, and continue your hard, tireless, I should imagine, work in rehabilitating the Hennops River, and you know, really you're doing this for our future generations, and we applaud you for that. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to the end of the show, and I'm going to start looking very differently at our drinking water and water in general. And don't think that the solution is necessarily in bottled water, because I think the bottled water comes from the same source. So lots for us to think about, and perhaps we're going to start thinking about how we can be more responsible with our water usage, and also the different types of chemicals that we use to clean up our environments. That's where we leave it, and we do hope you've enjoyed the show for today. As always, a big thank you to the production team, and please do take care on the roads. Till the next time, as always, it is Assalamu Alaikum and Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.
Ya hala, ya hala, ya hala. حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا، حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا. يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا، يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا، يا هلا ويا هلا ويا